My name's April. Je parle français comme une vache espagnole. And so I'm not going to do it in French. But I'm here to introduce the first speaker. So the first speaker is Satish Kanwar. I've known him for several years. We both live in Toronto. And I know him from back years ago when he was the founder and CEO of a successful user experience studio called Jet Cooper. In 2013, Jet Cooper was acquired by Shopify, which at the time was still a pretty small, scrappy startup with 200 employees. He's been the head of product all the way through their spectacular growth curve where they're now 3,000 employees. They went public in 2015. They now have a market cap of 18 billion, I checked this morning. He's the vice president and general manager of channels. He's also responsible for all the product. I think you guys are really gonna like him today, and so I'm super happy to have him here. So I'll invite Satish Kanwar to come to the stage.
Bonjour. Hello, everyone. And thank you for joining us at Le Product this morning. As April introduced, my name is Satish Kanwar, and I'm the VP of Product at Shopify, based in Toronto, Canada, alongside April. While I was born and raised in Canada, which means I learned French very early on and for 10 years, I'm going to be doing this morning's talk in English, and that's because my Canadian French may not make sense to you, and it's not so good. I'm really excited to be in Paris this week, though, because it's an opportunity for us to meet and be welcomed by the product management community here, which has been growing and evolving in such amazing ways, and especially as seen through this conference. And it's through events like today that we get to learn, meet, and grow global companies together, which I think is an important part of what we're trying to learn and do here today. So as a product leader, product manager, and a product designer at heart, there's no craft I know to be more important and more ambiguous than product management. And you'll hear a lot today about the skills that go into this, but I want to talk to you this morning about something a little more foundational, which is the impact of diversity on our products. In particular, why it's important for you, your product team, and your product's customers to build diversity into the way that you build your products. Before we dive in, for those that are not so familiar, I want to tell you a little bit about Shopify. Shopify is an e-commerce platform that helps you start, run, and grow a business. And merchants, they use Shopify to design, set up, and manage stores across all their channels: web, mobile, in-person, social media, and so much more. And while this started for us as a focus on small businesses, our enterprise scale has allowed us to grow to businesses of all sizes. There's even thousands of Shopify merchants right here in France, and a few of my favorites that I've shown here on the screen today, like SoShape, which sells these amazing and healthy treats. Shopify today is used by over 600,000 businesses around the world in over 175 countries, and they've made a total of $63 billion in sales through our platform. And if there's one thing I've learned from being here from the 10th of its size to today, is that this kind of growth and innovation doesn't happen by default, but it happens through constantly changing the way that we build our products and teams to meet these customer needs. So simply, we have to get better for our customers to get better. Our mission reinforces this to the company, that we have to make the decisions that help us lead to and grow more entrepreneurs. So let's jump in. What does this mean to us today? Well, I'll be the first to admit that we're not perfect by any means at Shopify, but it's important to us that we open these kinds of discussions for us all to learn from each other. So I'll share examples and observations from my personal experience in the industry, from being a founder of a product company and now from being a part of Shopify's growth, which has over 75 product managers today. And we'll talk about diversity in the context of product, what it means to truly build for your customers, teams, how to bring together different product perspectives, and diversity of work, why culture impacts the quality of our decision-making. As a Canadian, the value and importance of diversity has always been obvious to me. It's center stage inside our country. But this didn't translate naturally over to the way that we work. You see, for me personally, the conversation was always concentrated on ethnic diversity, which is important, but a good example of one and only visible part of what diversity looks like. And it's important to understand that it's far more than what these commonly discussed factors are, such as race, gender, and orientation. We have a lot to improve on these dimensions, especially in tech, where it's most underrepresented, but it's not that alone. Values, beliefs, experience, expectations, skills, economic status, all of these things and more make up what makes a person individually unique. And it's the inclusion of all people that's important to the way that we build our products. This is the diversity wheel from Johns Hopkins University and the Leadership Council there. And it's one of the tools that we consult at Shopify to inform how we think about this problem. You see, the center of the wheel represents the internal dimensions. They're the ones that are most permanent and visible to us. And the outside of the wheel, it represents things that are acquired and change over our lifetime. And it's a combination of these factors that makes each person individually unique and valuable to us. And this isn't only important because of the obvious morality, but because diversity is actually the best way to build products that scale with your customers. You see, the value of the products we create are increased when they reflect the customers we serve. That's the basic economic value of diversity. It's good for business. And you are not your customer. That's not me. While you might feel like you built the product to solve a problem that you have, or that you're close to the customer you're serving, that won't be able to scale with your business. Let's take a few obvious examples. Many people would have started a product because they had the problem personally. But as you grow, you develop too much domain knowledge about this problem to be relatable to your new customers. They were like you when you first started. And if you're great at lean startup or customer development, you won't be able to sustain that as the variety and breadth of your customers grow. Soon, you'll only hear what they say, not what they mean. And if you are building a long-term business, you need other people in your company to be able to make product decisions. So the more that they represent and reflect the customers that you serve, the more empathy they will naturally have. So let's look at how this applies to Shopify. Because at the very beginning, Shopify was built by a technical founder for a technical audience with a male-dominant customer base, primarily in North America, which certainly doesn't sound like the Shopify described earlier today. You see, while at one stage it was predominantly male, we've come to learn that most of our business owners are actually female, and that female entrepreneurs make up a majority of those that now use Shopify. We've also learned that the age spectrum has changed completely, where it used to be predominantly people under 30, but today the average age is over 35. And that location has broadened to over 175 countries. But most importantly, that some of our fastest growth comes from markets like Asia, South America, and Africa, where English is not the primary language of business. And even the profile and goals of these customers are changing, where many more come to Shopify to do part-time businesses and do things that they can spend their weekends on, which means that the way they derive value from the platform is completely different from a full-time business owner. It even means that on weekends, they don't stop using Shopify, they just switch to their mobile devices. So overall, we know our customer base has all of these various dimensions represented in it, and it's constantly changing. So we stand to risk alienating our own customers and getting in the way of our mission if we don't know and build our products to reflect these dimensions. So I'll show you a few examples of what can go right or wrong in this process. Many of you are familiar with Facebook's friend icon. It's a classic example of where we've seen this happen in subtle but important ways. As you can see originally, the man here is more prominent and the woman is smaller, in the background, behind the man with a less clear shape. And when a product designer at Facebook realized this, she made it so that the woman appeared to be more equally balanced in profile and in shape. The same thing happened on the Facebook globe icon, where it was originally designed to be fixed to their view of the world, which is the view of North America. And since it's redesigned, it now reflects the view of the person and their view of the world. These are subtle but important everyday biases that come through in our products when we don't have the right variety of skills and perspectives at the table. And this diminishes our trust with our customers. Customers wonder, was this actually built for someone like me? We took this thinking to our own products and designs at Shopify, where we found many interesting observations. You see, here's an illustration of a man with a beard carrying boxes to a truck. Seems pretty typical where I'm from, and this was an empty state on a product for deliveries. Except in many international perspectives of the world, for one, there aren't giant UPS trucks everywhere that are picking up packages, so that could be a milk truck for all we know. And a man with a beard may not be the most relatable or common, despite my own. Of course, it took someone from outside of our common influences to realize that this wasn't the same shared experience that others had when they thought about deliveries. So when we understand what it means to be inclusive in these ways, we can ask ourselves the right questions. And in this next example, if you look at it through the diversity wheel that I shared earlier, you'll notice that it doesn't suppose any age, any race, any geography, any sexual orientation, gender expression, personality, experience, economic status. None of those things are here in explicit ways. They're to your interpretation. I see a person with a hammer in a workshop building something. And almost all of those elements, the hammer, the building, the stature, that would normally suggest to you that it would be something that resembles a male. But intentionally, this is someone that resembles more female features, which is a subtle but important way to start changing the norms of even how our customers relate to our product. So you see, Shopify's product design team has taken a deep look at how this affects the way that our customers behave and trust us. And they've documented this well in our design system called Shopify Polaris, which I'm a huge fan of. And in particular, there's a principle posted there that they call being considerate. And the consideration means understanding the worldview and perspective your customer is in when they're looking at your product, where they come from, what they identify with, and even their emotion, whether they're doing something that's happy or even if their business might be failing. And you have to build your product to empathize with that. So as we work on expanding Shopify further, we see this lens completely differently in so many things we never questioned before. Take the simple example that you require a credit card to use our software, which might be true for a majority of the audience in what you do today. But one, that might not be the norm in many geographies where credit cards aren't the normal way of doing business. And it also supposes a specific economic status of someone that has a credit card and credit available to them to pay for software. So it's important that we acknowledge these gaps because they highlight the differences in where we'd like to be and where we are today in making our products accommodate all of these different dimensions. At least as of a month ago, Shopify is also available in French. So there are many more examples in our product and in yours, big and small, where diversity has to be considered to really understand whether we're creating scalable goods for our customers. Whether it's the types of interfaces and devices they use, performance and accessibility, translations, currency, localization, even content strategy, what education level and terminology we're using. To catch these, you need to have a strong mix of people and a culture that allows them to question why things are done the way they're done today. So this leads to our next part, which is the diversity of teams. All of this is only made possible by bringing together many different voices and perspectives. Achieving that doesn't come by accident. There's a real investment you have to make, whether it's time, effort, and yes, sometimes money, to build out these balanced teams. Almost every job posting I see for product managers today asks candidates to have 3 or more years of product management experience. So how many of you here went to school for product management? Nobody. There's no school for product management. There's nothing on my resume that suggests I should be doing the job I do today. And finding product managers through the means of looking for people that have been product managers supposes the same thing. Instead, it's about identifying potential from varying backgrounds and experiences that are going to make great product decisions. This is especially critical in these jobs because product managers become the nucleus of teams. They're the ones we expect to make and drive decisions. So I'll share a few of the ways that we've been able to expand on this traditional type of search for product managers and to unlock different kinds of backgrounds. The first is through founders. People that have built something of their own, however large or small, develop a certain type of behavior, accountability, and communication skill and credibility, which translates phenomenally well to the expectations out of a product manager, where you are expecting them to drive decisions and communication with a team and own their outcomes. Now, it so happens that I come from being a founder and joining Shopify, and that was a perspective that allowed me to identify with other founders that could translate into a similar type of position. And it's something that we started to see much more commonly through the industry today. They have the right philosophies, and it's something that anyone can develop as experience because you don't need school or permissions to become a founder, but most companies will not succeed. What they learn through that experience is something that's invaluable to your product team. So as Shopify, we've made 5 acquisitions specifically for founders and talent that was different from those that we had today. And that was an active effort to enhancing the quality of our product and our engineering teams. And we've hired many more through our local community of founders that have done amazing things, but not product management in that traditional way. Another way is to grow and test product instinct internally. And at Shopify, we do this through something we call Hack Days, which is every 3 months, we allow everyone in the company to work on anything that they want, with anyone that they want. And what this does is it gives them an environment and an opportunity for people to work with engineers and designers that would otherwise not have had that chance before. And that gives them product thinking through your company and allows you to see people that might surprise you in terms of the skills, ideas, and passion that they have for your product. We frequently put things from Hack Days into our actual product roadmap, and we even shape different teams around the kinds of people that formulate together through this kind of initiative. We've even hired people who have won Hack Days into product managers of teams. This influenced the creation of one of my favorite things, which was our APM program, what we call our Apprentice Product Management Program. And this became a way for us to develop more of our own internal talent into product managers. Because these individuals that came from marketing, design, customer support, IT, they have a high degree of context of your own company, which is invaluable at making decisions for your own product and customers. But what they lack is something you can easily provide, which is basic product management skills and training. And what we've done is take these high potential people, we pair them with senior product managers, and we surround them with the types of environment and tools that they need to develop this craft. And all of this, unlocking potential of people from different backgrounds and different experience profiles that we would not typically look at or find in a resume and search experience. To evolve this, we've even partnered alongside 9 other companies that are working together in Toronto to provide this kind of training out into the market. So we can work together at bringing new product managers from new crafts and new experiences into our companies. One of them you'll hear from later, from Wattpad, Shopify, and several others. And we are pooling our resources together through this Toronto APM program to provide this kind of training. And this is all because this is not a skill area that's going to develop itself, especially if you're looking for different kinds of profiles and perspectives. So I'll tell you the secret, right? It's that half of these product openings on our website are not even a majority of what we're looking for, because we now develop and focus on intentional ways of sourcing, training, and bringing in product talent that aren't going to be through the typical workflows that you're used to in posting out jobs. And that's a critical investment for our team. And it's important to building out our inclusive environment. You know, there's a familiar saying, which is we recruit in our own image. We look for people that look and think like us. The same is true the other way. People looking to join your company look and see if there are people that look and think and feel like them. And so if you're in a position today where you don't have a balanced team, it's going to be extremely difficult to develop one just looking through these traditional means. It's something that you're going to have to explore in a different way. So there are many best practices to consider when hiring, and I'm not an expert at this, but there are many resources available. But what I'll say is it's not one-dimensional even in that approach. It's to look at how the language you use affects your job descriptions. It's to understand if you have enough different types of perspective on your interview panel, and if you're doing your interview reviews and feedback in structured and consistent ways for everyone. There are a lot of ways to develop the practices you already have to be more inclusive. Last but not least, let's talk about when we build diverse teams, the fact that we also have to have the right environments to maximize the impact of them. So by finding, recognizing, and welcoming the differences, we have to create a supporting and safe culture so that people from these different backgrounds can do their best individual work. In my experience, you can learn a lot about a company from the way it makes product decisions. So we know that the collision of these different ideas is going to lead to the best results. And that means that we design our product teams from day one to have different disciplines in them. Each team has a product lead, a design lead, and a technical lead, which together own and are responsible for their product outcomes. So from day one, we give ourselves an opportunity to have 3 equal perspectives from 3 different craft disciplines and hopefully 3 different types of backgrounds and experiences. We also believe that we have to maintain strong opinions weekly held, which means that through the course of a product development process, we need to stay open to new information and new feedback, because not everyone in that team is going to know everything day one. And you have to provide the safe and supportive environment to changing product direction based on new information. And that information can come from anywhere. So we have to keep making decisions quickly, but we have to stay open to that input. And lastly, we work really hard to try to keep decision-making with the people that are closest to the problem. So to distribute that decision-making to the front line. So typically, this means that we're going to create more accountability and also introduce more risk by allowing teams to make more of their product decisions. And that creates the right circumstances for them to take more care, accountability, and more perspective into the choices they're making, instead of relying on running them up and down a command and control chain to get the right type of feedback. Instead, we can just work on more iterative feedback loops throughout the process when they ship things, instead of trying to assume that the leadership can make all the right decisions up front for every team. So it's a subtle but important change. This is also why we don't require any of our product teams to use a specific set of product management tools or process or workflows. We let every team choose their own ways of working based on the people, leadership, and problem that they're trying to solve. And then we allow them to share those best practices with each other. This helps us get the most out of every unique project, instead of supposing that we have one way of working that will work for thousands of different types of people. We also think about the different ways that people process information and ideas. For example, not everyone is going to be comfortable in a meeting room disagreeing with everyone else in the room. So you have to find different ways of capturing that feedback and not making decisions on the spot. One of my favorite tools is this little reminder that sits in every meeting room in every office of Shopify, which just asks the important but subtle questions of the way people are communicating with each other inside of that kind of team environment. So this one says, over-talking is real. Go back to the person who was interrupted to let them finish their thought. We even design our physical spaces to offer a mix of settings for people to collaborate in different ways. So there'll be more casual, intimate rooms, more large and open concept spaces, traditional boardrooms, and even private meeting pods for 2 people. Because the spaces around you also influence the ways that you think and you support people of different personality types. One of the tools we've used at Shopify to help with this is the Enneagram test, which some of you might have heard of before. This simply refers to 9 different personality archetypes, which show the way people think, feel, and act in relation to one another. It's a simple type of tool, not perfect, but to create the kinds of conversations for new teams, when you have new people working together for the first time, or teams that are having friction in working together, to better understand the behaviors of each other and how they can work together in healthy ways. So again, this is about individualization. It's not that there's one way that our teams need to work, but this team has a unique mixture of people that need to better understand each other, not to just better understand Shopify or product management. And so it's helpful at coaching, at self-awareness, and at self-development. And for those that might know, I'm a type 3 and type 8. You can look that up. And while we're headquarters in Canada, we have people that are working all around the world, some remote and some in office. So this has challenged us too at changing the way we think about communication. You know, we have to think more about when we use email versus Slack, or when we use a document instead of a meeting, or when we even post internal podcasts instead of talks and town halls, because these are more inclusive ways of communicating for people in different time zones and different settings. And even with the different offices we have around the world, there's no one macro culture and design that applies to all of them. We have microcultures that are relevant to the local audiences, local cultures, and local geographies. They are still distinctly Shopify in their values when you walk into them, but they emphasize what's important to the people that are working there. And in the end, for you to be an authentic product leader yourself, you have to focus on enabling your team to be themselves. So what are a few things you can take away then from this talk? I've shared a lot with you so far today. Very simply, diverse teams build better products that build better companies. And I think that's a fact and realization that we can all accept and work into our guiding principles today. If you need any more proof beyond asking those around you, you can look at McKinsey's Why Diversity Matters report, and they'll give you lots of clear and measured analysis of why diverse companies have outperformed financially less diverse companies year over year since 2005. And as you work on building up your product teams, I hope you'll be able to think more about how this impacts your product's customers, the makeup of your team, and the ways that you work. Everyone has to be responsible for this, and it has to become a part of your culture. The commitment comes from you and your leadership, but it won't happen naturally because you've listened to a talk like today or because you've read a Medium article. It happens when there's intentional effort that you plan for with your leadership team and with the rest of the company. You're going to find advocates, people that care, believe, and push these initiatives forward, and they can come from any level and maturity of the company, and it's your responsibility to support them and take their work through to others. So I hope that you found something today that can be helpful in your journey to building more diverse products and more diverse teams, or that it sparked an idea that you've had of your own at the back of your mind. We're not nearly perfect over at Shopify, but we care a lot about building a 100-year company. And that means caring about our people, our product, and our customers. And we know that diversity will be an essential element of how we get there. Merci.
That was awesome.
Hello.
Thanks so much. That was so great. Hey, so we're going to do questions. And if you haven't logged on to the Wisembly app, you can do that and ask a question there. And we have a handful of questions. So let's see. There was a question around, I thought this one was interesting. It was like, how do you keep consistency and alignment when your product team is scattered across the world with people from various backgrounds and cultures? You touched on this a bit, but I think the question is more, and they want to go deeper on that.
So because it's important to us that we're empowering the teams to make their own product decisions, the way that we achieve consistency and alignment is much more through providing context and strategic context of what's important right now to the company. So, we typically look at these as what we call product themes. So it's setting a macro number of priorities that we can put a lot of information, data, customer research, and other business goals forward to the teams on. And each team can then interpret what that means and how that impacts the work that they do. And that becomes a natural part of the checks and balances and whether they're being successful or not. And we find that that is a much more organic way for us to stay highly aligned, but keep loosely coupled in the way that the teams work, instead of trying to have a more rigid set of OKRs that you might be familiar with, which is a model that was popularized by Google, which is having an objective at the very top that kind of breaks down directly all the way through an organization down to every person's work. And we just find that that is a much more fixed way of supporting and succeeding with the teams than letting them direct their decisions.
Yeah. One of the things I found really surprising when in your slides when you were showing how you guys do stuff internally was I was super surprised that the teams get to pick their own tools. That was super surprising to me. Like, how does that work? Have you bumped in any weirdness with that you've got 6 or 7 different teams and they're all using different tools, and how do you manage that?
Absolutely. I mean, for us, it's minimum viable process. so we have an internal tool, which is the only common one that's used for us to record keep which people are on which teams and what the current projects that they're building are. And this gives them a way of feeding updates on that project on a semi-regular basis into a common view for the company. But how they plan and work on their projects, you have some teams in Trello, some in GitHub, some in Jira, some in Pivotal, some in spreadsheets. It's completely open to interpretation for what's right to the team. For some very small teams, it's just on the whiteboard as a Kanban board beside their desks. And that we feel provides much more, it's much more important that the teams can work fast in ways that they feel natural to them than for us to have a single way for leadership to see sprint tasks or specific roadmap items. We can take the cost of that on in different ways.
Yeah. Cool. There's a question about smaller teams. So if you've got a smaller sort of a startup, and there's not very many of you, how do you keep this diversity of profile when there's 2 of you or there's 5 of you?
It's a great question. There are so many things that influence the product decisions you're making at an early stage, which includes your investors, your mentors, your board potentially, even the first customers that you pick to do pilots with or to sell the product to. All of those audiences are potential sources for you to bring in a different mix of perspectives and opinions into your product, which can be equally effective at giving you different views of the work that you're doing than just being able to hire more people into your team. So there isn't, even as a one-person team, there's many ways for you to get out of your own head and to be able to build kind of a richer profile of perspective on the work that you're doing.
I'm looking, there's a lot of new questions. This one, people are wondering if you have a specific interview question that you use that tests open-mindedness, I would guess, in an interview.
Well, one of my kind of go-to questions, I'll say, is really asking a candidate, especially those that have had a long career of experience, what they haven't had a chance to learn yet. So really asking what someone is trying to learn or do different from what they've done before. And I think that for me is usually their answer, a strong indicator and understanding of their self-awareness, of their interest and ambition at the things they're still trying to achieve or develop. And also you usually learn something about the person, based on their vulnerability or their openness and explanation of what it is that they still want to learn.
So now you know what to say when Satish interviews you for your job. There's another question about how how the product management team is organized. Like, is it organized by product or by area? Or I have no idea how your team is organized.
Yeah, so our teams are organized at the highest level by the area of the business. So if they're working on the back office of Shopify or the channels, the way people sell, or on our developer platform. And then within each of those is usually by feature or problem. So you could have teams that are developed around things like onboarding and growth or the purchase experience, and you could have teams that are responsible for very specific long-term features like inventory management or analytics. So it's a bit flexible depending on the context. And those average teams can be between 5 and 15 people.
This is an interesting question. I like this one a lot. Is your product roadmap influenced by the need to do quarterly earnings reports since you IPO'd?
One of the things we're proudest of is, the IPO for Shopify was mostly treated as a financial event and a new form of accountability for the business. But it didn't change the way that we build product. It didn't change the way we set our objectives, and it didn't change the mission of the company. So a natural instinct would have been for the whole company to work on enterprise customers because they might be the most financially rewarding. But quite the opposite has happened as we've spent way more energy in continuing to make Shopify more broadly available to more people in more places in the world.
There's a question around how you would adapt the product to international audiences and how much you have product teams assigned to key countries or key geographies.
So this is something that we're just in the process of learning and developing. As the first, there are kind of two frontiers for us. The first and simplest has been language, which is sometimes less important than the second one, which is localization. So in the way customers pay for things in different geographies is different. The way shipping and logistics happens is different. The way taxes happen is different. Those things have real impacts on the business that we need to, or on our customers that we need to understand. And then we also want to work with them in the language and way that's most natural to them. So those are some of the things that we're developing, and we have the fortune, being Canada, of having people from many of these geographies that have joined us there, and we've also started, as I showed on that map, to build and hire teams in many other geographies like France, Germany, Japan, India, Mexico. So there are Shopify folk all over the world now that help us with this.
I think we're going to do one more question. Okay, last question. I like this question too. They're asking, are there still a lot of early employees at Shopify, or are you an exception?
I'm definitely not an exception. 5 years is a long time in Shopify years, but nowhere near the most. I think we've been very fortunate in having the kind of growth that we have, which has meant that there's been a lot of different types of problems and challenges that people have continued to be able to build their career on, jumping from different contexts and different areas in the company. And when you can create an environment that's adaptive to people learning different things and taking risks on people that have been with you for a long time and have those ambitions, that's allowed us to retain a lot of the early talent. And especially being in a market like Canada, typically when we go into the US, people assume Shopify is from California or something of that nature. And for us being from Canada, it also means that we can hire and grow some of the best talent because we're one of the fastest growing technology companies there versus being in the middle of the noise somewhere else. And I think that's also an advantage you all have being here in France.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.